What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and I don't think, Locals, Patreon. And all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. Doomberg, Happy New Year. Thanks for coming back on, and appreciate your time.
Mike, Happy New Year to you as well. Hope you had a great holiday, and always a pleasure to join you. Congrats on all your success. It's fun to see, I predominantly see your work through Substack, and it's great to see the platform growing and you having so much success on it.
Well, if it's people like you that are willing to come on and speak with me that are helping me grow this. So again, I'm going to push back to you and say thank you for taking time to talk to me. And
Sure.
man, we had the holidays, the New Year, and then there's no starting off with a bang, so to speak, huh?
Yeah, no, it's no shortage of things to talk about for sure. We scratched what we were going to do for our January on Doom Zoom and pivoted towards Venezuela, obviously, which is the subject du jour in the energy markets, at least. So, yeah.
What are your thoughts as we sit here? It's January 5th, 11:34 Mountain Time, because I'm in Arizona. What are your thoughts on this right now?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. We put together about a 45-minute presentation on it. I can give you the TLDR. First thing I would say is sometimes we get criticized for being a bit too cynical, maybe a tad conspiratorial, and also that we put too much emphasis on energy as it pertains to geopolitics. I can assure you that the events of this weekend won't dampen those instincts of our team because we feel pretty validated. We've been writing about this scenario since December of 2023, published a half a dozen articles on the subject. On the day Trump was inaugurated for the second time, we published a piece called Misreading the Room, where we pointed out that Maduro's real sin that we think did him in was agitating to go to war with Guyana over Exxon's major project offshore. And as we said in that piece, the history of strongman dictators who are on the critical path of oil exploitation by U.S. supermajor oil and gas companies is not a glorious one. So in a way, we aren't surprised. Hard not to be very cynical. We are in that phase of the standard neocon war where the early overwhelming victory has caused a bout of euphoria. If history teaches us anything, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, that this is but one of many, many steps in what could be a very arduous journey. So there's that. But there's no question that Venezuela is home to what many believe is the largest single hydrocarbon accumulation on Earth. USGS estimates 1.3 trillion barrels in place, 500 billion of those that are technically recoverable, and somewhere around 300 billion of those barrels that are categorized as proved reserves, bigger even than Saudi Arabia. That comes with a lot of caveats, of course. It's heavy oil. It's difficult to extract. The political environment is not conducive to the formation of capital to extract those hydrocarbons. But at the highest level, it is quite a remarkable thing. We could get into the morality and the legality of it. We decided not to in that presentation because it doesn't really matter. What matters is understanding and predicting, at least given our jobs. But happy to take it in any direction, Mike, that you think would be interesting for your listeners.
Yeah, this is what, earlier today I was Steve Hanke and Dave Collum. We were talking about this, and international law is only as good as somebody that's willing to uphold it. And they had come to the conclusion that it was against international law that this was done. But, one of the things that was pointed out is, Maduro was removed, but the regime is still intact. And the VP, who is now the president, is probably a stronger, Chavismo, if I'm saying the word correctly, than Maduro. which I find.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, no,
Sorry, no, you go ahead.
please.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if you saw her Instagram post this morning. She's coming into line. There's no world where the U.S. isn't going to, quote, take over and run Venezuela. The fix is in. I think he was clearly sold down the river from insiders. And, you know, as much as, say, Russia and China may have caught up to or even surpassed the U.S. in raw military power, neither of those countries can compare to the U.S. As it pertains to intelligence operations and regime change operations. I think we have one ongoing right now in Iran with these protests. The CIA knows what it's doing, far more effective than the FSB in Russia or whatever they call it these days, or Chinese intelligence. And so, what the U.S. maybe is falling behind a bit on sort of military and industrial might, it more than makes up for in black ops type operations like this. And so a lot of money was probably changing hands, and there's just no world in which, at least in the short term, the U.S. doesn't get what it wants out of Venezuela. So I think there's a bit of grasping at straws. Hey, the government is still there, the military is still there, please. The military stood down and let this happen. We're not on the ground, you're not on the ground, but we've seen this rodeo before, and we know who remains on the bull when it's done.
What kind of dollars do you think would have to be exchanged in order for this to be? This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and bam, I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. I can also take delivery at any time, extremely simple and less expensive than any other method. The do-it-yourself way to buy precious metals. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. I mean, look at how easy this is. The Vaulted app on my phone, I can access it at any time. Complete.
Well, it's not just dollars, it's all manner of, let's say, encouragement, blackmail, all the dirty tricks. And look, I mean, credit where credit is due. No American service men were injured. That's a wonderful thing. And so far, there's relative peace in Venezuela as far as these regime changes go. It's pretty, I guess the word we would use is clinical. There's all kinds of, theories floating around the Twitterverse about, election interference and voting machines and what Maduro knows, and who knows if any of that is true. What we do know is that it's a huge hydrocarbon resource. The type of oil it produces is the exact type of oil that much of the Gulf Coast refinery system was built to handle. China, in particular, Russia less so, has been making huge inroads into the southern part of the Western Hemisphere. And I think it's time that people take Trump quite literally as it pertains to his, strategy document that he released. Very clear that Greenland is next. I think you'd be naive to think that we won't see American soldiers flying in helicopters into Greenland and just taking it over. We can talk about the consequences of that. And obviously, much to the sort of pleasure of Rubio, Cuba's going to collapse. That government will not be in charge much longer, not the least of which because it is utterly dependent on Venezuelan oil to keep what semblance of an electricity grid it has still lit. And that oil is going to be cut off. And so, lots of ramifications for this. A really big ramification for this, though, is we've very clearly devolved from international law, Security Council of the United Nations, to might is right. And that's fine. It's just an observation. It's not even a moral judgment. There were plenty of things wrong with the old system. But that means, for example, that if we follow J.D. Vance's tweet, what stops a court in Moscow from charging Zelensky with a terrorist attack on a passenger rail car or whatever? And then Russia swooping into Kiev and doing the same thing. It's certainly true that the U.S. has ceded any moral high ground when it comes to war. Of course, you could argue there is no such thing as moral high ground when it comes to war, that it's fundamentally an oxymoronic thing to even say it. And of course, China and Taiwan, China and Taiwan, that whole situation is lit up. Reports over the weekend about Chinese social media saying that this is an excellent precedent for Xi Jinping, and they can go ahead and blockade Taiwan now and force regime change there, because clearly might is right, and locally China has a lot of might. And so if the rules of the game have fundamentally changed, and Trump has gone out of his way, he's not even trying to hide it, right? That's what Trump is. Trump. I mean, listening to that press conference, truly an astounding press conference. I mean, there's no effort at even a pretense as to what this was all about. Which, again, some would say at least he's being honest about it. Like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was a big giant lie. Trump doesn't even try to have a big giant lie. He says, I'm going to go get the oil. They stole our oil. We're getting it back. Like, all right. Well, there you go. So as we say in the opening of that Doom Zoom presentation, we're feeling a little validated in our cynicism.
Well, so getting to the oil, because how much capital is going to be needed to build the infrastructure to where that oil can start to be refined, and then two, how long would this project or process take before you'd see results?
Yeah, so I see a lot of chatter about this, and there's a whole cadre of commentators, a lot on Twitter, some on Substack that we call wishcasters. So these are people that really want the price of oil to go up. And any major news event is viewed through that lens. And so the people that want the price of oil to go up are out in force saying this is going to take forever, it's too expensive, blah, 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 right? Because they would like for the price of oil to go up. And if it were easy and it wouldn't take long, then of course the price of oil would go down. So they have an argument, but let's ponder the potential, Mike. So at its apex, Venezuela produced, in round numbers, 4 million barrels a day. The closest comp to the resource base is Canada, Alberta, Saskatchewan, parts of British Columbia, roughly the same size. Different geology, but roughly the same API of oil produced and the same challenges that come with it. And Canada, unlike Venezuela, is not a hot mess. It didn't devolve into a lawless society. It hasn't experienced a bout of hyperinflation. Contract law is still a thing in Canada. Institutions are still strong. We have many Canadian subscribers who would beg to disagree with that, but nobody would confuse Canada with Venezuela. And Canada today produces 6 million barrels a day of oil comfortably and 20 BCF per day of natural gas. Venezuela produces 3 BCF per day of natural gas and less than 1 million barrels of oil today. If Venezuela had stayed on its track, there's no reason why it couldn't be outproducing Canada. We show a chart in this presentation. Global oil production by country in 1965. Venezuela was third, behind only the US and the USSR, and ahead of all the Middle Eastern countries. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Iran, Iraq. So in the oil and gas world, possession of the resource is just as important as your current flow. And so it is unabashedly bearish long-term for oil prices. Even just debottlenecking existing supply and getting it out faster. There's, in one part of Venezuela, the Lake Maracaibo area where oil was first discovered and the bulk of its historical oil was produced. Of course, there's this heavy oil belt in the East Venezuelan basin that everyone's excited about. But the old traditional medium to heavy grade production stuff, I saw an estimate that there's 1,200 wells that are capped that could be quickly brought into service. I mean, I wouldn't underestimate the technological capabilities of the super majors if they get it in there. The best of Canadian oil sands expertise goes down there. And one thing about the oil and gas industry is, regardless of price, all they know how to do is drill. You know, the old joke, oil found in hell to make room for all of the oil men in heaven as they dive out of heaven to go drill. It's real. They have no discipline. there's no shortage of capital, especially for a national strategic interest, a thing like this. Trump wants to make the U.S. into an empire. We wrote a piece half-heartedly predicting that Saskatchewan would be on Trump's radar. I'm not sure if you saw that.
I saw that.
Yeah, Tempting Target was the name of the piece. Greenland's next, for sure. And Greenland is the sovereign territory of Denmark. And last I checked, Denmark is a member of NATO. And I think this is really the end of NATO. It's the end of the alliance between the U.S. and the European Union, for sure. Certain European nations will still remain close to the U.S., but the EU is the walking dead. Watching them twist themselves into pretzels to draw a distinction between what Trump did in Venezuela and what they accused Putin of doing has been quite humorous. Not to, you know, um, make light of what Putin has done, but if might is right, which Trump is unabashedly saying, well, that's fine. I mean, the rules have changed now. And there's other pockets of might around the world. They will not be constrained. And it really scrambles the axioms for a geopolitical analyst. And then, in a way, it certainly makes it interesting to be a content creator, that's for sure.
Well, it's in simple terms, he who has the biggest stick, right? Was what it comes down to now.
100%. I mean, again, just go and listen to Trump's really astonishing press conference at Mar-a-Lago, after the snatching of Maduro. Look, Maduro's a bad guy. Venezuela's a mess. Corruption is rampant. It's a tragic story, a broken country. The role U.S. intelligence played in breaking that country, we'll let the historians figure that out. There's no doubt that the Caribbean is a hotbed of illicit drug trafficking. I think the president is absolutely correct to try to stomp that out. I think if I were president of Mexico, Scheinbaum, I'd be fixing to finish up that trade deal and no longer waiting for the Supreme Court to strike it down. Let's go ahead and get that done. I think Canada was kind of put on notice. Like is it implausible that Trump wouldn't roll into Alberta? Who could say it's implausible today? It's totally unprecedented. Again, I saw it on Twitter. In 300 years, Trump will be a mythical figure that nobody believed existed. I mean, he's just so outside the norm that it's truly quite remarkable to watch.
So getting back to, I want to talk about Greenland, but in regards to Venezuela, I mean, I guess it comes down to how, these companies and the United States government comes in and handles this with, able to keep the masses at bay, right? And not have some type of uprising or major civil unrest. So, what would be the best approach in order to, minimize that or not let it happen? Because this could go a lot of different directions.
Yep. Right. As I said at the very beginning, we're in the euphoria, chest pumping, Lindsey Graham on Air Force One, giddy as a child at Christmas. We're at that phase, which is dangerous. The best way to do it, and the option still seems to be preserved, is to buy everybody out in the existing government, have them stay in place and maintain order, and renegotiate all the deals, which seems to be the strategy. And if it works, great. It'd be the first time ever the U.S. Affected a regime change and came out for the better. I hope so. I mean, I hope for the people of Venezuela. I'm, of course, being naive that anybody cares about the people of Venezuela. But, there was a time when Venezuela was the wealthiest country in Latin America by a wide margin. It is a cautionary tale as well. That hyperinflationary bout, I remember watching it unfold. I remember the OPEC meeting in 2015 where they decided they were really going to press on the war against the shale producers. And I remember posting to Facebook to the 5 people that, saw my page back when I was in industry and you didn't really have much of a social media presence. I said, if I knew how to short Venezuelan dollar, I would do it today. And that the inflation in 2018, I think, ran 1,000,000%. You know, it effectively had to dollarize its economy. A lot of suffering, a lot of wealth destroyed, a lot of crime, a lot of uh, emigration out of the country, a real disaster. Um, and so, do I hope that this marks an inflection point for the people of Venezuela? Sure. It's kind of hard to be optimistic in that regard. Cynical would probably, again, be a more validated response. But we're, mostly interested in what comes next. And I wouldn't underestimate the potential to add 500,000 barrels a day pretty quickly. And also, you have to remember a key driving force is Guyana next door. It's not like the oil stops at the fake line on the map that is the border. And there's a huge amount of natural gas in the offshore part of the East Venezuela basin. Trinidad and Tobago has been exploiting that for many years, kind of punches above its weight in natural gas. Has a nice LNG export terminal right there, Atlantic LNG. 3 trains still run, used to be 4. I imagine they could get that 4th back on. And, there's just an enormous amount of hydrocarbons in the world. Last thing I would say is this whole affair should put to bed this nonsense about peak oil. There's so much oil in the world. What constrains marginal oil production is politics, not geology. And Venezuela is stark proof of that.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask you, the idea of abiotic oil. Is there any evidence of it?
Yeah, again, I think China's drilling for it aggressively. We wrote a piece on this called Deep Thoughts, as I may recall. I try to remember all the names of our 400 plus pieces that we've published over the years. And I find the hypothesis, it's not a theory because it's not widely accepted. I find the hypothesis compelling. Our mental model is that there's an infinite supply of hydrocarbons for modeling purposes. And the rest is just time and money. And in a world where things got short at all, the price spikes that would follow will induce a massive supply, which is forever thus. And so once you have that as a mental model, it's a lot easier to explain the world as it is, but you don't really need abiotic oil. There's so much natural gas. Everywhere you poke a straw in the ground, you get a geyser of natural gas. And the U.S. in particular is just swimming in it. Read a great story today on RBN Energy. Anybody who reads that story today about just the onslaught of natural gas collection systems, natural gas pipelines, and natural gas storage sites, and natural gas export terminals that are coming online in Texas and Louisiana, and you happen to think that geology is going to constrain any of that? I mean, you just don't know what you're talking about. There's just an enormous amount of it. Can't get rid of it. It's the cleanest burning hydrocarbon on the board. It's practically free in the Permian Basin. The U.S. is an energy gigapower. Taking that technology around the world, if we truly needed to, could totally happen. Venezuela will be the first test case. So yeah, there's just so much oil. Even if abiotic oil is nonsense, and many people listening probably think it is. We did a whole presentation on this for our Doom Zoom as well. Deep dive on a forbidden hypothesis, I believe was the subtitle of it. I'm attracted to such things because I find them interesting. Anytime the crowd and the consensus says this is so out of bounds that you're not even allowed to think about it, history says it's almost always right. Yeah. So.
Well, and I probably should have clarified for people that have no idea what it is. And I've just recently heard the term abiotic oil. So could you do a definition of what it is?
Sure. So the consensus view of hydrocarbon formation is that dead life, dead photosynthetic life, plants and algae, get trapped underground, and through some combination of pressure and temperature, and they get cooked, and they get reduced into hydrocarbons and natural gas. Then migrate their way up to the surface and get trapped in various places, and that's how all the oil that the world has seen is formed. according to proponents of that theory. And there's lots of evidence for that theory. The first half of our presentation is walking through all of the evidence for it. But a couple of people have postulated otherwise, notably some old Russian and Ukrainian scientists. And in the US, most famously Thomas Gold, who was a professor of astrophysics at Cornell, wrote a great book on the subject, if you're interested, called The Deep Hot Biosphere. And as an astrophysicist, he noticed that there's methane and ethane everywhere you look, all over the universe. Famously, the moons of Saturn have giant lakes of methane. And he came to the conclusion that methane is primordial. And most startlingly, the type of observation that once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It is his belief that life started subsurface and that photosynthesis is a late-stage Darwinian development, and that the oil that we see is partially eaten natural gas, partially oxidized natural gas, and the biological debris that we see in oil is basically fossils of subsurface life that exists on a vast scale. And when you read the book, it's pretty provocative. I enjoy such hypotheses because they make you think. They scramble your axioms, as we like to say. And he's a pretty thoughtful guy. He's now dead. May he rest in peace. But he was a sort of a vigilante scientist. He liked to disrupt fields. And we suspect in 40, 50 years, he might be viewed as being correct. The thing that is most powerful about the sort of biogenic theory of oil is that it helps oil companies find oil and gas, which makes it very compelling. That doesn't mean it's right. It just means it's useful, incredibly useful. Right enough for economics is all you really need. And so, yeah, that's the abiotic theory of oil.
But to this point, if I'm understanding this correctly, there's been no evidence of it being real yet.
There's some. Again, we get into this in great detail. It's kind of hard to describe verbally without the. There's plenty of evidence, actually. So here's what there is. There's very little in the way of evidence for the consensus theory that couldn't also be explained under Gold's hypothesis. And there is at least some observations that are difficult to explain that Gold points out. For example, the association of helium with natural gas, not to get too deep into the weeds of the book. Read the book and see for yourself. And so there's some things that are difficult for the existing theory to explain. Now, the way science is supposed to work is the moment an existing theory can't explain a compelling piece of evidence, that theory is nullified. However, since science is practiced by humans, it almost never happens that way. What happens is things get twisted or ignored for 30, 40, 50, 80, 100 years until it just can't be ignored anymore. But that's all right. The existing theory works just fine. There's plenty of hydrocarbons. We're swimming in them to the extent that the existing theory helps oil and gas companies find more hydrocarbons. And we're all for it. Energy is life, after all. But yeah, so as a careful scientist, almost to a fault, we always invert, we always nullify because nothing is true forever. And that is, in fact, the definition of science, is nullifying as many hypotheses and theories as you can. Rejecting the null hypothesis is literally the statistical heart of the scientific method. And so we've gone away from that as a society, this whole, settled science nonsense, which is, I can't think of a greater oxymoron than that phrase. There's literally no such thing as settled science. Is what it is.
I want to come back to Venezuela here for a second. If this is successful, and only time will tell, would that put on hold the idea of de-dollarization? Because with the oil, and assuming the dollar will play a role in that, would that slow that process down or put it to a halt?
I don't think so. In a might is right world, you're going to see a bifurcation between the Russia-China axis and the U.S. axis, if you can call it that. It's basically just U.S. now and a bunch of vassals in Europe. The big open question, and we talk about this again, and the Doom Zoom we're going to hopefully publish this week, is Brazil. the B in BRICS is in the wrong hemisphere. Lula is in a tough spot. As we say, and again, you don't have to believe any of this to be true. What matters is not what you or I believe or what anybody listening to this believes. What matters is what Trump believes. Trump believes the 2020 election was stolen from him. And Trump believes that Lula stole his election in Brazil with the help of Biden. And, there's a Trump candidate in Brazil who's currently in jail, Balsaroma. And Trump knows that if he had lost or believes, I should say, that if he had lost the 2024 election, that he himself would be in jail. So, yeah, that this is, I think the big question mark on the board is Brazil. And so, yeah. Bolsonaro. Sorry, I mispronounced his name. Bolsonaro. I'm not very good at pronouncing. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, and so for that matter, because it's virtually the neighbor, but yet Brazil wants to be a part of what China and Russia and India and Iran are doing.
Well, Lula does. I wouldn't conflate what any particular politician in any country does with the country, even the U.S. I mean, half the country hates Trump. 80% of Congress hates Trump. There's a reason why they won't break the filibuster is because if you had a secret ballot, 80% of the senators would vote to impeach Trump. They don't want to see his platform be introduced and implemented into law. There is no such thing as Republicans in Washington. That's a great fallacy. There's the uniparty. There's a scattering of MAGA types, and there's a scattering of far left-wing types like Bernie Sanders. 80% of Washington is aligned. He, in a way, is pleasing that base by having this regime change in Venezuela. Again, all you have to do is watch Lindsey Graham gleefully smiling, hopping around Air Force One like he'd won the lottery. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen. Have you seen that clip?
I saw that, yeah.
Pretty disturbing. Never saw a man so happy to be in a war. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, and then so now we go to the subject of Cuba, and Marco Rubio is saying that they're in a lot of trouble, and the neocons seem to be celebrating this as well, which I would think if they were to somehow the embargo were to be lifted, I mean, there'd be a lot of tourism that would go there. I mean, the country would, and the people would benefit tremendously from that.
Oh, sure. Look, again, how is it that in 2026, I guess it is, we have a communist outpost a couple of dozen miles off the coast of Florida? That's not going to happen. That's not going to, if poly market were legal for me to participate, I would be betting large on regime change in Cuba in 2026. Yeah, for sure. That's over. That's literally down to a minor detail at this point. That economy is collapsing. And yeah, look, I mean, I think the sanctions against Cuba is a great scandal. That here we are, 70 years later, and they still exist, however long it's been. So for sure, I mean, once the U.S. flips a switch, Cuba's going to be an appendage to the United States. Yeah, sure.
And that's something where you see that in short order?
Oh, sure. Look, they got oil off the North Shore there, too. I mean, a lot of resources, the casinos, all of that. It'll be, the Godfather all over again.
How many years how many years of fossil fuels do we have?
An infinite number of years. In 2050, we'll be producing at least 130 million barrels a day of oil. In perpetuity. There's an infinite supply, Mike. I mean, there just is. We're barely scratching the surface of what's available. Just take the 50-year price of oil in ounces of gold and show me on the chart where peak cheap oil is. It just doesn't exist. It's such a fallacy. It's so, at some point, it becomes frustrating to see people recycling the same old failed ideas. Like, how much evidence do you need that you're wrong before you would admit it? It's just, we're swimming in this stuff, Mike. It's just, and the very definition of oil is undergoing a molecular semantic shift. We just have this tsunami of natural gas liquids and natural gas, and chemists know how to rearrange the molecules and Your friend David Collum can tell you. And engines are being switched. The crude oil is the most expensive hydrocarbon on the board today by a wide margin. Tied for first with landed LNG in Europe. Sorry, because they do the same thing. Landed LNG in Europe is burned to produce electricity, and so is crude oil. Might surprise listeners to know that 4 million barrels a day of crude oil is burned to produce electricity when we're swimming in natural gas. So NGLs are cheaper on an energy content basis. Natural gas is free in the U.S. Look, $3.50 a million BTU natural gas is the equivalent of $20 a barrel oil. That's the expensive stuff in the U.S. It only gets cheaper from there. Western Canada, can't get rid of it. So there's no universe in which we're anywhere near peak oil. And so my definition of infinity is I will be dead before it even begins to matter. And I will be long dead before anybody even ponders that we're running out of oil. Just look at this. We've been saying this again. We wrote a piece December 2023 called The New World's Oil. And back then, we're already beginning to point the finger at Venezuela and how that situation ultimately had to be resolved. Malay, Argentina. If you just take Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, Venezuela, Vaca Muerta in Argentina, and continuing to grow Brazil and getting a new government in Colombia, which is coming, there's 10 million barrels of extra oil waiting to be brought out of the ground. We're producing 104, 105 today. That gets you to 115. I said 130 by 2050. Suddenly it's not all that unrealistic. The rest of the world has barely taken on shale. China is working very hard. By the way, the salt formations of Brazil exist on the western coast of Africa because those two continents used to be stitched together. And so there's several million barrels of oil potential there. The Arctic, enormous potential in the Arctic. There's just an enormous amount of oil. And the people who are wish casting that the price of oil should go up because they're long oil or for whatever reason, they're not doing their readers a service. If we thought oil was going to go up, we'd write it. We have no skin in the game other than to be correct. And our subscribers value that we're giving them our honest opinion backed up. We show our homework and we defend our positions. We'll debate anybody. I was on a debate with a famous oil production bear / price bull on Adam Taggart's show 2 years ago now. Price of oil was in the 70s, high 70s. And I said on that podcast, the equilibrium price of oil is $55 a barrel. And the best way to visualize the price of oil is in ounces of gold. And that number is going lower. It's going to take less and less gold to buy a barrel of oil. Heck, an ounce of silver buys you a barrel of oil now with some change. And where are we? $55, $56, $57 a barrel oil 2 years later, as predicted. How did I come at that number? Well, I told you landed LNG does the same thing as Brent at the margins, enough overlap and switchability that they trade in lockstep with each other. So if you plot 5.8 times the price of landed LNG against Brent crude, you'll see they trade in lockstep. Why? Because there's 5.8 million BTUs of energy in a barrel of Brent crude. And natural gas is priced in dollars per million BTU, so you multiply it by 5.8. Well, our equilibrium price for natural gas is $10 per million BTU landed LNG, because at that price, everybody in the chain, from the driller in Appalachia to the exporter on the Gulf Coast to the LNG cargo, LNG carrier operator to the regasifier to the midstreamers in between, at $10 a million BTU landed LNG, everybody can earn their cost of capital, not much lower than that. And so that became our equilibrium peg, because oil and gas are co-produced in the Permian now. And then you just multiply that by 5.5 to 6, and you get that $55 to $60 a barrel equilibrium price for oil. And lo and behold, 2 years later, we're literally on the number. And yet people still parade about proclaiming the end of oil, oil abundance and so on. It's really a great mystery of our time. I mean, look, it's called Doomberg. It's kind of a sarcastic name. Catastrophe sells. I get it. but at some point, like you kind of have to be correct on a few things too. So anyway, I digress.
What about? I want to get your thoughts on silver. And have you heard about a silver-based battery? Is it in Japan, Samsung maybe, or one of these companies?
Yeah, yeah. Silver. God bless the people who love silver. So I'll just say up front, I have no position in silver. Don't really know the market that well. It's not very interesting to me. I care much more about gold. Silver is an industrial metal more than it is a monetary metal. Um, One of my good friends, Sir JJ, over at Market Vibes, has done a great job of trading silver and writing about silver. And everything I know about silver, I get from him. The only other thing I would say about silver is when you start to see the memification of anything and just the volume on Twitter about, you know, bank runs and, you know, as if any bank is going to fail over silver. I, if you don't sell into strength, when are you going to sell? It's kind of, my friend Tony Greer's got a great point, right? Like, so if you've been buying silver in the 30s based on this thesis, and today it's what, 75? When are you going to sell? Like, what price would you sell at? It's an interesting question, right? I'm not saying the rally's over. I've just seen these Icarus prints before. Now, silver's a small market, easy to corner. Momentum can take a life of its own. Nobody really cares if silver goes up. So it could certainly run much more. And on top of that, the elasticity of supply is allegedly not as quick, although I think there's an awful lot of junk silver on the sidelines that would be happy to be sold at these prices. Look, I have 100 ounces of silver in coins in a safe somewhere that I hope to use. I hope to never have to use as barter in a shit hit the fan situation. Pardon my French. But I'm glad I own it. But it's not really life changing. You know, it's just a couple of coins I have in my basement. To everybody who's long it, made money. I'm certainly happy for you, but you don't really make money until you sell. So we'll see.
Have you read anything or done any information on the idea of a silver-based battery that they're working on?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I would fade that. This battery technology is. We've written a lot about battery technology, have some experience in it in our days in industry. It's like one of the most slowest moving incremental technologies there is. And sodium battery, yes, silver battery. I mean, I'm sure there's some patent somewhere that mentions silver that somebody has overblown on Twitter, but I haven't really dug too deeply into it.
What about sodium batteries? How viable are
Uh,
those?
oh, very real. China is dominating that space. Yeah, and we're beginning to see the first. So again, like as much as we're critical about renewable energy for the grid, I own a fair bit of solar batteries, and I'm sort of a hobby of collecting generators and understanding electricity, and I own a fair bit of portable solar as well. You know, sort of a prepper. I'm not ashamed that that's a compliment where I come from. You know, and I saw the first sodium battery for sale, and I checked out the specs. So sodium has a couple of advantages, real advantages, and then one really significant disadvantage. Almost no fire risk compared to lithium ion, which is a real big deal, and super cheap. So for grid storage, for example, probably a superior choice than lithium ion batteries. The biggest challenge with it is gravimetric density. Sodium is a much heavier element than lithium. And that manifests itself in, for example, an 80-pound battery that might be able to store, 3,000 watt hours of power with a lithium phosphate battery, which is still pretty safe, much safer than the first generation of lithium ion batteries. A sodium version of that might store 900 watt hours or 1,000 watt hours for those 80 pounds. And so if you're going to be lugging them around to like power your fridge, that's probably not great. But if you want to build a shed with them to back up your homestead with your solar panels, fire risk being wildly reduced and them being much less expensive are two important attributes for you. And if you're not moving them around or you're not putting them in a car, they're probably pretty good. Batteries, there's no silver bullet, pardon the pun, in batteries. You have recharge rate, fire risk, energy density, cost, and you have to sacrifice on one or two of those in any battery system. And again, the most recent bout of innovation by the Chinese notwithstanding, it is an industry that has taken decades to very slowly evolve. There is no such thing as an S curve in the battery world.
What about the in vehicles?
I mean, sure, for short distances. The Chinese have a EV strategy that makes perfect sense for China. They're short crude oil, chronically so, and they worry a lot about pollution in the cities. So yeah, makes sense to have an EV in Shanghai or Beijing. It makes sense to run your diesel trucks on LNG instead of diesel because you get much cleaner burning exhaust. And so for the Chinese, if you're never leaving Shanghai, yeah, get yourself a Tesla or get yourself a BYD, especially BYD plugins. I mean, these are really great technologies, super cheap. The Chinese have dominated the auto industry. It's just a matter of time now before all the big automakers, before their equity stacks get wiped out. But I mean, a sodium battery with a plug-in hybrid probably makes a lot of sense in a city. But in the U.S., the EVs just don't make as much sense. We're just so spread apart, and everybody drives everywhere so far. Can't really beat the internal combustion engine for performance across the dimensions that matter. Here, I do think plug-in hybrids have been wildly undersold to the detriment of the environment. I do think a good plug-in hybrid RAV4 that gets you 40 miles on the charge and then 300 miles of range on the engine is like a perfect vehicle. And battery costs are coming down. That vehicle is becoming more accessible for people. I'm all for it.
What is your take on these data centers that are being built everywhere? Which before you answer that, I live in Arizona, and whoever thought it'd be a good idea to build these things in Arizona, Nevada, where there's no water, Colorado, it still baffles me.
Yeah, this is an industry that is growing so fast that it's still working out the kinks. We did a whole talk on artificial intelligence and the bubble aspect of it, but at the same time, it's very real and it will be very profound. We think the data center boom is real. We're having a piece published tomorrow lampooning the whole concept of data centers in space. So this is something that's relatively fresh for us. The water needs of a data center aren't as bad as some people make it out to be, I think. But there's plenty of places to build them. They need to go off grid. We wrote this a year and a change ago in a piece called Irreconcilable Differences. The current grid cannot absorb data centers, and so they have to go off grid. And we have another piece lined up on Ohio and their new law there, SB 15, which creates the regulatory framework to allow data centers to produce their own power and stay off grid, which is exactly what's needed. And so that's coming. So this will work itself out. Again, anytime you see an exponentially growing technology like this, the perma bears come out, point to some temporary constraint and say, ha, this whole edifice is going to collapse. We hear the same thing about produced water in the Permian, when the economic incentive isn't there, when the economic incentive is there, people will figure out how to solve these problems.
So in your piece, you would say AI, there is a bubble, but the idea, it will get there, but it's not there yet. Is that safe for me to say?
It's wildly disruptive already. Yes, there's a bubble in the valuations of certain stocks, for sure. It's unclear how all of this data center stuff is going to get built out. There's all kinds of red flag financial engineering going on, where the likes of Meta and so on are keeping the debt that is underwriting these data center expansions off their books. And so people, of course, are pattern recognizing back to the Enron days. Financial engineering has gotten pretty sophisticated since then. Doesn't mean it won't happen again, of course. But that doesn't mean that the world isn't going to radically change. It is going to radically change. So yeah, it is fascinating to watch. I used to be much more of a firmer bear myself, learned some hard lessons. Betting against human ingenuity is always a sucker bet.
So has your stance changed? Are you no longer bearish on energy?
Oh, I'm bearish on energy because that is a bullish bet on human ingenuity. Like the oil and gas companies are technological superpowers and they are grinding deflationary machines. I would be bullish energy volume, and I wouldn't mind owning a company that enables energy volume to grow because that is the easiest bet in the world. Human energy consumption is the ultimate up and to the right chart, and it will continue to be. But if you're a price-taking commodity producer who is deflating your own product, I don't want to own that. If I can avoid it, all things being equal, there's certain things you'd want to own, of course. But and if you're interested in dividends, then sure, go buy Exxon and Chevron. But by and large, they're price takers who produce commodities and they deflate their own foundation day after day, week after week, year after year. They just grind away at it. They're very good at it. Thank God they are. I have nothing but admiration for those companies. Doesn't mean I need to own their equity.
We touched on this earlier, and I want to jump across the pond here in relation to Iran and what's going on there now. I haven't checked in a couple hours to see if the protests are increasing or if they've been quelled but I've seen this before, right? We saw this last summer. Where even President Trump had suggested or announced that people in Tehran should evacuate, and the regime stayed in power. Do you think this time it potentially could be different?
Yeah, hard to say. I'm not there. We have seen this movie before. I would say the euphoria on the part of Trump and those who surround him is dangerous. Everything that's going on in Iran right now does scream of color revolution, classic, Israeli, U.S., British intelligence shenanigans on the ground. If Iran hasn't hardened itself against such operations by now, then that regime deserves to fall. 12-day war should have been a wake-up call for the leaders of Iran. If they were too stupid to make the necessary changes, then in a way it's sort of, in a might is right world, the next logical Darwinian expression is that that regime should collapse. We'll see. What we don't think can happen is just an outright remake of the 12-day war, because Israel would suffer very significantly in such a war, in our view, for reasons we have articulated in a couple of pieces. But a dirty war, regime change war, you see videos of protesters, quote unquote, with AK-47s, and how did that weapon get in there? And not hard to connect the dots as to what's actually going on, which in a way makes the Venezuela operation so successful. Again, credit where credit is due. So we'll see. The fog of war is very thick. Propaganda is very, very thick. Hard to say. Not being there, been through enough of these to know that whatever's being fed to us in the Financial Times or CNN or the Washington Post is almost certainly not true. So we'll see. I'd be shocked if they haven't learned how to get a handle on their own internal counterintelligence situation, but you never know. Maybe they haven't. And if Iran does fall, I think that's like Venezuela is one thing, but Iran is way more important to China than Venezuela is by an order of magnitude. And if Iran does fall, I think you'll see China move on Taiwan.
A lot of pieces moving around right now, Doomberg.
Might is right is a dangerous world. Look, I mean, the odds of nuclear war have gone up measurably in the past 3-4 months. And it is our view that many in the West are far too flippant about the nuclear capabilities of Russia, China, and North Korea, and their willingness to use those weapons. Um, we'll see. I hope we never find out. I would love nothing more than for our concerns to be seen as alarmist in hindsight. That would be great. I would love that. We're as close to nuclear war as we have been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't think that is even arguable statement, a debatable statement at this point. All you have to do is read the Russian propaganda and see the Chinese propaganda. The outburst of "let's go take Taiwan" in China over the weekend is pretty real. Chinese government doesn't allow such things to fester unless they want them to, generally. So dangerous times. Of course, as we speculated before the whole Venezuela operation unfolded, there's always a chance that there's been a grain deal cut. Russia takes Ukraine, China takes Taiwan, the U.S. gets Venezuela and Greenland, and they fight it out over Iran. That, of course, is probably a bit too tinfoily for most people to imagine, but stranger things have happened in history.
What is your opinion of second generation nukes?
Don't really need them. You mean for civilian or for weaponry?
Weaponry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first generation is more than enough to wipe everybody else off the face of the earth. Being anti-war, I certainly do wish that nuclear weapons didn't exist. I know that's a fantasy, and a naive one at that. So I acknowledge that mutually assured destruction is a real thing. I think that the technology that matters more is the delivery systems and their evasiveness from, anti-missile technology and defense technologies, and far less to do about the warheads themselves. But admittedly, it's not my domain expertise, and I do think that you're counting angels on the head of a pin, angels that we hope we don't have to see here soon because of a full nuclear tactical exchange.
And from a civilian standpoint?
Yeah, the AP1000 is more than good enough. Let's just build a lot of those. Fusion, for example, is a fake problem, a fake solution to problems that don't exist. Meltdown risk has been solved. Nuclear waste is not waste. But the propaganda is just so thick that you can't even say those things without people looking at you like you're crazy. So,
I give you so much credit how you retain all this information, remember it, and like your research. I don't want you to out yourself, but do you ever explain to people your background, a little bit of where you came from?
No. Yeah, I'm a trained scientist, I'm a PhD scientist, and spent a couple of decades in heavy industry. And when I was climbing the ranks, one of the things that helped my career was my ability to write about technology in language that Czech writers could understand. And instead of doing that internally for the corporate world, we created a business and we do it, externally for the world. And look, the inefficiency in the market that we occupied was, in the energy debate at least, the industrial voice was missing because most people from industry are buried behind public affairs teams, industrial relations, or investor relations teams. We're not constrained in those regards. And the key founding members of Doomberg all come from heavy industry. And I'm just the front of it, of course. And look, we've written 440 articles, and we have to research, write, edit, publish, promote, and defend a piece every 4 days. I'm in the comments personally for the first couple of hundred comments at least, after every piece that we publish. You get, by the way, it's the only thing we do now. And we've reached sort of this network effect where we have an amazing amount of inbound ideas coming our way, an amazing Rolodex of experts that we can outbound fact check, sanity check our articles and thoughts against, that can't speak publicly but are happy to speak off the record. I mean, we have contacts all over industry who love what we're doing and feed us ideas or are willing to sanity check for us. One of our best subscribers is one of the pioneers in the natural gas shale world. And I remember we were making a pretty big call about the glut of natural gas, and I called him up. And I said, this is what we're doing. And he says to me in that Texas drawl, I don't know that much about gas. I just know that we got way too much of it. And when you get that kind of validation from somebody who has literally, tens of millions of dollars riding on the answer, that's pretty compelling validation that your thesis is probably right. And so, when it's the only thing you do, every piece we get better, we learn, we've made mistakes, we get things wrong. We're not afraid to be wrong. The only problem with being wrong is not learning your lesson. We've learned many lessons. We have a good hit rate. Nobody's perfect. We're willing to make some bold predictions that don't always pan out, but at least make people think. But when you are on a 4-day treadmill for 5 years, you tend to develop and maintain a pretty solid knowledge base. And look, if you're blessed enough to find what it is that you were meant to be doing in life, you just keep doing it, Mike. And that's the plan. Like, we're going to be doing this for another 20 years.
Do you have a hard time stepping away from this? Like to go somewhere on a trip or something?
It's a business that ports very well. And one of our commitments is our subscribers never know when anybody is on vacation over here. We get ahead of it. We plan around it. There's, not to give you too much inside baseball, but you're a content creator yourself. Certain pieces have what we call headline risk and others don't. And so if you have a key member of the team going away on vacation, or if I'm going somewhere, you write a couple of pieces with no headline risk and have them in the can just to get ahead of it. But I love doing it, so it's not work. So I don't need to escape from it. I'm happy to do it in a hotel if I'm on the road, tending to other parts of our business, because we do things other than Doomberg, but mostly private investing and a few other things. And so it's not work. Like I get to do Doomberg. I don't have to do Doomberg. I get to be on the internet all day thinking about the next piece, doing a podcast with you, listening to podcasts to try to learn something. Every day I get up, I read the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, I read the LA Times, I read Bloomberg. I check the headlines, I read RBN Energy, I read Upstream online, various industrial news articles. I check all of the propaganda outlets. I'll read some Russian news, some Ukrainian news, some Chinese news, some British news. The British propaganda is the worst, by the way, like by far the worst. Canadian propaganda. And then pieces just come to me. It's like, oh, okay, let's write about that. Here's the hook, the peg, as you call it. What are you going to hang a piece on? What's that peg? And the piece just comes together. It's great. Looking forward to publishing Lost in Space tomorrow. Lampooning data centers in space was a fun one to write.
Yeah, you don't seem to have writer's block, you or your team.
No. It's there's, again, Trump in a way is nectar from the gods. God bless him. He's a unique individual. He invokes such a strong emotional response in people. He doesn't with us. It just is what it is. He's a piece on the board. You have to analyze the chess pieces as they lie. Really an incredible character in an agnostic way, just incredible, literally an incredible character, unique, broke the mold, good and bad. And the only challenge with Trump is he's just walking headline risk, just is. So like we've laid down the track for this Venezuela doom zoom. We would normally be publishing this kind of stuff at the end of the month, but we've got to get it out before the headlines change radically and it makes the whole thing moot. So we did all this work over the weekend to throw it together and to record down a track and to get it edited properly. And you know what it's like, right? I mean, to do an interview that you can't wait to publish, but you got to do some work on it. Next thing you know, the news cycle changes and it's stopped. So,
well, and the thing is too, with regards to Trump, I mean, he thrives in chaos, and
sure.
We'll never see anything like this again in our lifetime.
No, he's unique, very, very unique guy. I mean, look, very flawed. And I think, the people that blindly support whatever he does aren't doing him any favors. But nonetheless, we like to say he is everything his critics and his superfans say he is. He's all of those things. He's the guy who hired Chris Wright and wants to unleash American energy dominance and wants to catalyze a nuclear renaissance, and he's the guy who launches Trump coin 3 days before his inauguration. I mean, he's just both of those things. He just is.
Don't forget, Doomberg. He's also going to be hosting a UFC fight on the White House lawn this summer.
Sure.
Have you seen that? Did you see that?
Of course, a lot of gold in the Oval Office. You know, he's Trump. He's Trump University, right? And by the way, like Trump coin doesn't, you know, it doesn't nullify his great energy policy, and his great energy policy doesn't excuse Trump coin. Like, and I think his social media is totally unacceptable for the president's office. You know, like FAFO about, you know, snatching the leader of another country. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm naive, but
well, even the Rob Reiner comments, and you know,
sure.
But he's not a traditional guy. People were very upset by that, but it's, you know, he's been around. Trump is not new to the scene. He's not a traditional guy with his comments. So
no, I mean, I remember when he came down the escalator and he just said, like, I'm going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. It was one of those lines that you just like, wow, you know, and then he won. So there you go. You know, God, you got to give him credit. He is the most persistent politician in modern history.
And he's a reality star. I mean, we are in a reality show now.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, again, you got to take the whole package. You know, he is what he is. There's not much you can do about it. He is nectar from the gods for a content creator, with the one caveat that headline risk is real.
Where can people find you?
Two projects I'd like to plug, if you don't mind. We have Doomberg.com, which is where our newsletter is. And then we launched a new publication called Classics Read Aloud on Substack, classicsreadaloud.substack.com. One of Doomberg's co-founders and its editor-in-chief is very passionate about, you know, finding and curating great literature from the past and resuscitating it, and bringing it back to life. And it's done in the same Doomberg quality. It's been a great success. A lot of crossover support. Two wildly different projects, of course, but it does show you the depth and breadth of our team. Very proud of that project. So Doomberg.com for all of our articles. You can also find a link to Classics Read Aloud there as well. And if you've got a 20-minute walk today and you want to listen to a great short story, well-read and well-produced, you know, from a century ago or older, head over to Classics Read Aloud too. Mike's been great. I know we covered a lot of ground. I'm looking forward to the next time. Yeah,
I think we need to do a Doomberg Dave column, Coffee and a Mike with Doomberg and a side of column conversation in the future.
You know, just tell me when.
That'd be. I think people would get a kick out of it, and I know I would get a kick out of just hearing you guys chat for an hour and a half. Although, you know, the Dave column effect, it's hard to get a conversation in under an hour.
Yeah, that's fine. That'd probably be a 3-hour show, but I'm happy to do it. So.
Thank you.
I'm happy to sing for my supper. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you as always for doing this, and I look forward to continuing to follow your work and more conversations ahead.
You bet.
Mic drop.